Okay, so we'll go back to Canvas to find this week's module. So again, these first two are just your textbook readings that go a little bit more in depth about the things that I just talked about. So those are there for you, and then you'll find exercise 1 here, and it is going to be hopefully just like an overview of the main tools and functions that we're going to be using to kind of get you a little bit more comfortable with these different tools. So I have an exercise here. This isn't going to be typical where I have something that you are going to download and open up and work off of. You're usually going to just be creating your own files. But for the purposes of this exercise, I do have this where you can just download it here and then open it up. Hopefully. And it should look like this here. And so in each of these boxes, there are 14 boxes. We're just going to test out some different tools. And then on the Canvas assignment, it'll go through what I want you to play with in each of the different boxes. And so we'll just go through that together here. So the first thing that I point out in your Canvas assignment is the commands that your mouse can actually do. So your scroll wheel is actually kind of a tool itself. So you can scroll in or scroll out with the scroll wheel. You can also press and hold that scroll wheel, and it turns you into more of this orbit feature where you can kind of swing yourself around the model. So I'm just pressing and holding on that scroll wheel to be able to do that. And then if I do that same thing, press and hold, and you'll see that red and green, my mouse turned into that orbit tool. And then if I also hit shift, it turns into that hand, and now I'm panning more left to right. So rather than swiveling around the model, I'm able to just move more left, right, and up and down. So that's holding the scroll wheel plus hitting shift. And you might also see, just like the instructor panel has those different kind of tips for us, down in the lower left corner, I'm not sure how well you can see it right here, it's also giving you some tips right there as well. So it tells you to select objects, you can click and drag, but then also whenever I pressed and hold my scroll wheel, it suddenly changes and it says drag to orbit, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just dragging around and orbiting. And then it tells you if you hit the shift key, you can now pan. And then if you were to hit control, that kind of suspends gravity in a weird way. I don't really know why you'd want that, but that's the option. So that's also a helpful little area that just kind of, if you don't remember, like, oh, do I hit shift to do this? That should usually tell you what you're able to do. All right, so if we get into the assignment, we'll start in box 1. And we've just got this little rectangle here. And so we're just going to play with the different ways that you can select and deselect objects. And so I go through each of these in the Canvas assignment. So the first way that you can select and deselect objects, well, obviously you can just click on one and that'll select it for you. If you want to select multiple objects, you just hold down that shift key, and then you might be able to see it on my screen, but hopefully you see it on yours. Right next to my cursor, a little plus and minus showed up. So that's telling you that you can now select or deselect. So I can just keep pressing that shift and start clicking multiple things, and it should all stay highlighted. And so you'll notice whenever I am selecting surfaces, they're going to turn more of that, kind of like that dotted surface will come up, and so that shows you that it's selected. And then for lines, it's showing you that they're now blue. So that kind of helps you to decipher which ones you have selected and which ones you don't have selected yet. And then the same thing if you're just holding the shift key still, it allows you to both select and deselect. So then I can just click over those same ones that I have selected, and then they will start to deselect. So now those dotted patterns are going away. and the blue lines are turning back to black. You can also just hold the Control key, and then you'll see next to your cursor it's now just a plus sign. There's no minus sign, and so that lets you know that you can only select objects. You're just going to add. So if I start selecting things, it's adding them, but if I go back over them, they're not going to deselect because I'm just on the selecting tool right now. And then if you want to, let me select those again. If you want to only deselect, then you hold down both Shift and Control at the same time, and now you see just that little minus sign next to your cursor. So now I can start to deselect, and it will not let me select. Sometimes that can get a little bit tedious if you want to select a lot of objects at once. You don't want to go through and individually click each thing. So you can click and drag. So if you come from the top left, so I am clicking and I'm dragging, and you'll see that a box is starting to form over the areas that I have selected. This will start to select just the objects that are fully within that selection box. So if I let go, it's only going to select the objects that were completely within that rectangle. So you'll see it didn't select this surface here or any of the lines that I didn't fully have within this rectangle here. However, if I go from the bottom right, so the opposite side, and I start to drag forward, you still get that same little rectangle box, but this time anything that even touches that rectangle box is going to be selected. So that might be a little bit easier for you if you need to select multiple objects. But just be aware that it's going to select anything that your rectangle touches. And then a couple more here. So you'll see if I just select this surface, it's only going to grab the surface itself. But if I double click the surface, it now selects the surface and all of the bounding lines for that surface. So that's a quick and easy way to grab a surface plus all of its bounding lines. And then if you were to triple click, it's going to select anything that is touching whatever you've selected. So you've got quite a few options to be able to select and deselect. And so that first box is just there for you to try out all of those different options. And then you can always come back to this select tool by either clicking on your little select tool that should hopefully be in your ribbon somewhere, or you can also hit the space bar. So let's say that I were on a different tool. If I just hit the space bar, it'll take me back to that select tool. And so we'll go over a couple of those. A lot of times SketchUp has hotkeys or like shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts. So I'll try to remember to let you all know those because I know that I use hotkeys a lot. So I will try to point those out to you because it makes things a lot quicker rather than having to go and find each tool that you need each time. So that's box one. So we'll go into box two now, and this one is going to be about using the move tool. So for the move tool, it's the one that looks kind of like arrows that are going in each direction. So you can either grab that guy, or the hotkey for that one is M. So if I were on the select tool and I hit M on my keyboard, it should automatically activate that move tool for you. So to use the move tool, you select your objects and then grab the move tool to activate that tool. And then you click once to choose a starting point. So we will click once to choose a starting point. And this is also something that's pretty important. You see, I didn't have anything selected yet, and I just started to grab a point on this line. And it's only moving that singular point. It's not moving the entire line. So if I want to move the entire line, I first have to select the line and then activate my move tool, and then it'll move the entire line. So if you're having an issue where you're trying to move something but it's only grabbing a certain thing, just make sure that you have everything selected that you're wanting to move at that time. So whenever you are moving your object, you can grab it from any point. It can be on the line that you're grabbing it from, or it can, you can start way out over here and start to move it. So it doesn't really matter where you grab from, unless you are, trying to be very specific. Then you will want to grab a certain point and move it to that certain point. So you can either just, move it freely on your own, or you can also type in a measurement that you want to move the object by. So let's say, in your assignment, I say move the line in box 2 6 inches to the right. So the first thing that you'll want to know is that SketchUp, the units are automatically just in inches here. So you can just type 6 and it'll move 6 inches. If you wanted to move it 1 foot, you would have to type 1 and then the little apostrophe for the foot symbol. So if you want inches, you don't need to specify the units. If you want feet, you do need to specify the units. So I've grabbed my line here, and then I'll just type 6, and you should see down in your measurement box, you can see the 6 that I have just typed in, and then you hit enter, and the line will automatically move that 6 inches to the right. So if I wanted to move it a foot, I would click to grab it, start moving in the direction that I want to move it, and you'll see that SketchUp is kind of snapping to that axis to help me get that 90 degrees, those orthogonal lines. And so it should do that snapping along the red, green, and blue axes. So that can be helpful to make sure that you're modeling very accurately. So if I wanted to move it the 1 foot, I'm moving towards the left. I'll type in 1 and then use the apostrophe for foot and then enter, and that'll move it 1 foot for you. Or of course you could type in 12 for 12 inches. Let's move on to box number 3, and we're going to learn how to copy an object. So for copying, you are going to still use the move tool. There's not a separate tool to copy, so it's still just the move tool. So again, I'm just going to grab this object, grab my move tool, and then from here to start to copy an object, you will click the control key to activate copy. And that tells you here at the bottom, it says that control will cycle between copy, move. So if I just click it once, you don't have to hold it down here, you can just click it. And then that plus sign will show up next to your cursor, so that tells you that copy is now activated. And then I can just grab it and start to move it, and so you'll see that our initial line stayed in place, and I've got another copy coming with me now. And then same thing, you can either just move it graphically, whatever distance you want, or you can still type in like the 6, enter. Still works the same way as the move tool, it'll just leave a copy in place instead. And then I always forget something that I just did. You'll see I did undo. So if you ever do something that you didn't quite mean to do, so I'm going to copy it over here. You can always go up to edit and then hit undo. Or for just a little bit quicker, you can Control Z, and that'll be more of your shortcut for undo. Let's see here. Box number 4 is about the push-pull tool, which is basically extrude. So it'll turn just a 2-dimensional surface into a 3-dimensional object. So you select the push-pull tool. It is the one that looks like a brown box with a red arrow pulling it up. So you can either hit that, or the keyboard shortcut for that one is P. So you can either just start to hover over the surface that you want to extrude up. So I haven't clicked on anything just yet, but I'm hovering over it, and you can see that those dots show up, just like whenever we selected things, those dots showed up. So I'm hovering over it, and then I'm going to click once, and then start to pull up in the direction that I want it to extrude. And then just like the move tool, you can move it just by yourself and then click to finish. Or you can specify the units. So click to grab the surface, start pulling it up, and then you can do your 6 and enter, and it'll automatically move it up that 6 inches for you. So I guess in the assignment I said to move it up 1 foot, so easy, just grab it by clicking once. You don't need to click and drag, and then type 1 foot, enter, and there it goes up 1 foot. And then I also put in here the push-pull tool will only extrude in a direction that is perpendicular to your surface. So you can't push-pull something in like an odd angle. It's only going to go 90 degrees from whatever surface you are push-pulling. So with this one here, if I click it, it's only giving me 2 directions, either up or down. And then you'll see that my snaps are still kind of activating. If I just kind of hover over another line or another object, it'll automatically try to extrude it to whatever height that's at. So if I had another rectangle over here that I already knew was at 1 foot, and I wanted to get this guy to 1 foot as well, I can just grab it and then start to hover over any of these lines over here, and it's automatically going to bring it to that same level, and then click to finish, and they should now be at the same level. Another thing that you can do with the push-pull tool, if you just know that you put this one at 6 inches, you should be able to double-click that next surface, and it'll automatically remember what you just last extruded to. With me so far? Am I going too fast? Okay. Box number 5. We're going to see how we can create different objects. So we've got several different tools that are going to help us create the geometry that we want. These are going to include mainly the line tool, which is this one that looks like a pencil. So that is your line tool. That one's hotkey is L, I believe. Yep, L works for that one. You also have the rectangle tool. Just looks over here like a little rectangle, or you can also hit R to activate that guy. You have the circle tool, which is over here as well, and you hit C to activate that one. And then the last one that you'll need for this box is the arc tool. You've got a couple different options for arc tools, but we're just going to focus on the 2-point arc right now, and that one's shortcut is A. So in box 5, we're going to do a couple things here. The first one is to create a line that is 6 inches long. So you select your line tool or hit L on your keyboard, and it wants to be 6 inches long, so you just choose a starting point. I don't specify in the assignment where to start at. I'm just going to start at this intersection of grid lines here. So click once to start. We're not dragging, we're just clicking once, and it can start us going off in any direction, but as you see, it'll start to snap to different grid lines and the axes that we have. Even the blue axis, we can snap to that one, and that one's giving us more of that vertical line. So we just want to choose a starting point, and then choose a direction, and then type 6 and enter, and that one's going to give you your 6-inch line. And you'll see that SketchUp lets you keep going, so you don't have to keep going and choosing that line tool over and over again to keep going. So from there, you can just keep on going with different lines. But for your assignment, just a 6-inch line here is great. And then next, we'll create a rectangle that measures 3 inches along the green axis by 6 inches along the red axis. So we'll choose the rectangle tool, or you can press R on your keyboard to activate the rectangle tool. Again, I'm just going to start at this intersection to make things easy. One thing that I have not quite figured out is I can't figure out which direction, either the red or the green, SketchUp wants you to specify first to be able to type in the dimensions for a rectangle. So the way I kind of get around that, because I can type in 3 by 6 and it's like, oh, okay, it chose the green direction to do the 6. I don't know if it always does that. I don't think that it does. So just to like kind of make sure of myself, I'll start it off. You just click, you don't need to drag. And then in your little measurement box, it tells you how long your rectangle is in each direction. So it's telling me that it's 5 and 7/16 in one direction and only 1.5 inches in the other direction. So that helps me to see, oh, my longer direction is the one where I've got the longer end of the rectangle. So I know that's kind of annoying that I don't have a certain solution for you, but that's kind of my workaround for it. So I know now that the one that's going in the red axis is the longer one. And it's the one that comes first in my dimensions here. So we want 6 inches along the red axis and 3 inches along the green axis. So to type in our measurements here, we just need to separate those two dimensions with a comma. So for the red axis, we have 6 inches, so I'll type in 6, comma, 3, enter, and that should get me a rectangle that is 6 inches along the red by 3 inches along the green. Next, we're creating a circle that is 6 inches in diameter. So I'll grab the circle tool, or you can hit C. So you'll want to choose a starting point, and that's going to be the center point of your circle. And so we want a diameter that is 6 inches, but since we're starting at the center point, SketchUp needs us to specify the radius. So radius is just half of the diameter, so I'm going to want to specify a 3-inch radius. So I choose my starting point, just click to start, and then here we can just type in 3 and enter, and that should give me a circle that is a 3-inch radius. Yes?
Is it always in radius?
It is always in radius, yes. With the circle tool, you're always starting at the center point, so it wants just that radius dimension. All right, and then the last one that we have for this box is the 2-point arc. So I'll grab that tool here, or you can hit A for that one. We're creating an arc that is 6 inches in diameter. And so for this one, it is going to be the opposite. You're going to specify the diameter for the arc tool. So whenever you start, it'll be one end point, and then you'll specify the next end point of that arc. So I'll just click to start that guy out, and then start to choose the direction that you want it to go. And we're doing a 6-inch diameter here, so I'll hit 6 and enter, and that'll start to give me that second point of 6 inches. And then I can just start to pull it out in the opposite direction. And once you meet kind of like that half circle point, it should snap for you, and you can see that there's even a little dialog box that tells me that I've met that half circle. You can also, if you know that you want a specific radius for this part, you can type that in here. So if I did want it to be that half circle, then I would need 3 inches for the radius. So I would type 3, enter, and it should give me that half circle. All right, box number 6. we will look at the eraser tool. So the eraser is just going to be like your delete. It literally just looks like a big pink eraser. You can also hit E to activate that. And the eraser tool actually has a couple of different functions that it can do. You can completely erase something, which is just like deleting it. You can also hide an object with the eraser tool, or you can soften edges with the eraser tool. And so we'll go through each of these three objects here to see what each of those do. So for the first line, we're just going to erase it. So you can do kind of the similar things that we did with the select tool, where you can either click each individual thing that you want to erase. So I just clicked it once and that got rid of my line. Or you can also do the click and drag feature, and that will start to erase anything that's in your path that you're dragging through. So if I come back to my box 5, for example, and say I want to erase all of these things, I can just press and hold, and then as I start to go through, you'll see that things are starting to highlight that blue. So if I just am dragging all throughout here, and then whenever I let go, all of those things go away. Something to note is that whenever I was clicking and dragging, I erased those lines that are kind of bounding the surface of this circle. So once those lines are gone, then the surface disappears. But I can't just go through and click on the surface. It won't erase it. So the eraser tool really only works for lines rather than surfaces. And then you can also delete things without the eraser tool. If you're just on your select tool, if you grab an object and just hit delete on your keyboard, that works the same way. For the second line, we're using the eraser tool to hide this line. And so SketchUp has the ability to hide certain geometry. If you just don't want to see it in a certain view, you can just temporarily hide it rather than full-on erasing it. And so to do that with the eraser tool, so we've still got the eraser tool activated here, you just need to hit the Shift key. And whenever I do that and grab that, it looks like it disappeared here. But, oops, I got a little lost. Here I am. But it is actually just hidden. And we can make sure that it just hid it rather than full-on deleting it. We just need to go to, in our top menu ribbon here, we'll go to View. And then we're just going to hit the check mark on Hidden Geometry. And once I did that, now you can kind of see our line is more of a dashed line. So that's indicating to us that it is hidden rather than fully erased. And so that'll always help you if you do want to see where your hidden objects are at. You just need to hit these little check marks here for the hidden geometry, hidden objects, and those will let you either toggle on and off being able to see that hidden geometry. And then I also wanted to mention, you can still do that without the eraser tool. You will just select an object, right-click, and hit hide, and it'll do the same thing for you. So either your eraser tool or just right-clicking the object, you can hide. And then with this last object here, we're going to use the eraser tool to soften the edge that joins these two planes together. So we're going to soften this line here. So with the eraser tool, you will hit Control this time. And if we click on this line, you'll see that now everything is nice and smooth. I don't see that harsh line. So this might be helpful if you're doing maybe a waterfall countertop and you don't want to see those harsh lines on your countertop. Now you've just kind of got this nice surface that glides around. And I mean, you can, so those are helpful for getting those adjoining planes together. And then you can also keep on hiding, shift. For all of your different objects, you can hide different lines, soften different lines, just so that you're not seeing all those harsh edges if you don't want to see them. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you only soften lines if they're perfectly parallel to each other?
Good question. Let's test it out. So, like if I had this and see if I can get it on the blue here. No, we don't want the blue. I don't know if I'll be able to get it in the right direction that I want it to go. Did that go up? Yes, but it is vertical. Let me move this guy really quick. Okay, so now that's more, nope, that's still in weird. Okay, so that now should be more in like a angle. It's not quite 90 degrees. Is that what you mean? Like, can I still soften this line here? I believe you can. Let's test it out. Same thing, you can right click and you have that soften option here as well. So you've got hide or soften here. Yep, that one still likes to soften. So no, I don't believe it has to be at a perfectly perpendicular angle. If you ever need to kind of reverse what you've done, if you've hidden a line or softened a line and then you realize that you actually didn't want to do that anymore, you'll go up to your view and just make sure that those hidden objects, hidden geometry are checked. And so now I can see the dashed lines of the ones that I hid as well as the ones that I softened. And I can just click on those, right click, and now soften has turned to unsoften, so I can get that back. Same with the hidden line. There's an option to unhide, so I can always get that back to its original state. Box number 7. We will use the offset tool. The offset tool is this guy here. It looks kind of like a partial circle with an arrow that's kind of bringing it out, or your hotkey is F. So you're going to use the offset tool to copy a path the same distance in all directions. So to offset the boundary lines of a surface, you will select the offset tool, click on the surface that you want to offset the boundary of, type a measurement and hit enter. So basically, with the offset tool activated, we'll hover over our surface here and it starts to pull up those dotted lines, or I'm sorry, that dotted surface. And you can also see kind of that red square that's letting us know the different lines that it's going to offset. So if I click once, I can either start to drag it inward and it'll offset all of the bounding lines of that surface. It'll start to copy those inward, or I can also pull it outward and it'll offset those outside of the surface. So I can either, just click to finish that point and you'll see that the surface as well as the lines has offset, or I can also specify the distance that I want it to offset at. So we have in our assignment that to offset the lines of the rectangle 1 inch inside of the original rectangle. So if I'm on my surface here, click on the surface and start to pull inward, type 1, enter, and that should offset all of our lines 1 inch inward. And you'll see what that also did is, since I have these different bounding lines of the surface inside, these are now treated as separate surfaces. So as long as you have lines that are creating a closed loop, it's going to create its own surface. And this might also be a good time to talk about the different graphics of the line and how SketchUp will let you know if you are indeed having a closed path or not. So these lines here on this surface are a little bit more of a lighter line weight, and that lets us know that it has completely made its own surface. But if I were to come and draw some other lines here, and I didn't quite get my surface closed, those lines are much thicker, they're more black, so that kind of lets us know that, hey, you are not in a closed loop yet, so SketchUp is not going to create a surface here. But then once I close that loop, those lines are going to turn more of that lighter line weight. And then we can also use the offset tool just with lines. It doesn't have to be for a full-on surface. So to offset lines, if I just have the offset tool activated, it's not going to work with lines. It'll only work with the surfaces. So here's another instance where I need to make sure that my lines are selected before I try and use a certain tool. Just like how it was more useful for the move and the copy tool to select our lines first or our object first. If you want to offset just lines themselves without the surface, you're going to want to select your lines first. So I've selected my two lines, grab the offset tool, and the assignment says to offset the two lines 1 inch outside of the original lines. So, oh, where'd they go? There we go. So they are highlighted, and that red square is going to show up again. So click once, and again I can either pull inward or outward. For this particular assignment, we want to go 1 inch outside of the original lines. So again, I can just type in 1, enter, and it's going to offset it 1 inch equally in all directions. Another thing just to kind of note here is that offsetting creates a copy of your lines. It's not going to take the original ones and move them to the offsetted path. It's just going to create a copy of them. We'll move to box number 8, so down here in the lower left corner, and we're going to learn how to use the rotate tool. So rotate is going to look like these two arrows that are kind of in a circle here, and your hotkey for that is Q. I don't know why they chose Q, but they chose Q. So to use the rotate tool, you can rotate an object to any specific angle. So again, here you'll want to select your object first and then activate your rotate tool. So I just hit Q on my keyboard. You'll choose a starting point, and that will become the point that stays in place while everything else rotates around it. So you'll choose your starting point and then kind of specify a direction to be like your 0 angle, and then you'll be able to rotate the object the way that you want. So for this first one, we're told rotate the first line 90 degrees starting from the midpoint. So if we start at the midpoint, and SketchUp will snap to that midpoint here, it shows up as kind of a blue circle, and your dialog will say that, hey, this is the midpoint. So if we click once, and then you just need to start off drag in one direction to kind of specify that 0 degree point. So, and then click once you've kind of established that. And then you start to rotate, and my object is rotating along with whatever direction I go in. And you'll see down in your little measurement box, it's also showing you the angle that you are rotating it by. So if I stay at that 0 degree that I initially chose, that angle is going to stay at 0, 0. But the more I move away from it, it'll start to change the angle. So I can either, snap to the 90 degrees to move it that way, or I can type in 90, enter to do that 90 degrees for me. So degrees, just like inches, you don't need to specify the units. SketchUp just already knows that it's an angle whenever you're using the rotate tool. And so then the next line here, we want to rotate this line 90 degrees, this time starting from the bottom end point of the line. So we'll kind of see how the line rotates differently if we choose a different starting point. And we're also going to see that we can copy the line to the rotated angle. So with this first one, we rotated the line itself just to the specified angle, but this one we're going to leave a copy in place. So I have my line selected. I'll hit Q to activate the rotate. And now I'm going to choose this bottom end point, and again, SketchUp will snap to it for you. It's a green circle this time. So I'll click once. Start to define your 0 angle, and then we're also going to want to hit Control here. So just like with the Move tool, how Control was copy for us, we'll do the same thing here, where we hit Control, and that little plus sign will show up next to your cursor, and now we have copy enabled. So then once we start to rotate, so you'll see now we're rotating from that bottom end point that we specified, whereas the first time we did the midpoint. So just whatever point you choose is the one that's going to stay in place. And then we can do the same thing. We hit 90 and enter, and now we have a copy of line in the 90-degree angle. You activate the Control key while you have Q or the rotate tool selected. So I'll just go over that again real quick here. I had my line, Q for rotate, we selected, we hit the Control key to activate that copy, and then we were able to specify our angle. And then anytime you have something selected, like I still have my line selected here, you just hit Escape and it'll deselect for you. Of course, you could hit your space bar and go back to that Shift or that Control plus Shift to deselect. You just always hit Escape to get rid of whatever you have selected. Box number 9 is the Follow Me tool. This one's a little tricky. So the Follow Me tool will extrude a surface along a specific path. So when we talked about the Push and Pull tool, how it will only extrude in an angle that is perpendicular to your surface, we can use the Follow Me tool to extrude the surface along a specific path. So it doesn't have to be a 90-degree angle. So for this one, we are going to select the Follow Me tool, which is the one that kind of has kind of that brown half circle with the red arrow inside of it. This one actually does not have a hotkey inherently within SketchUp. There is no default hotkey for it. We will learn how to create our own hotkeys, but just for, I know that tonight's lesson is kind of a lot of information, so just for right now, we'll just find the Follow Me tool. Yes? Great question. So for that, we will go up to the window on your menu. Window and manage trays, I think. And let's see, maybe not that one. Okay, you can go up to tools, and the Follow Me tool is within here, so you'll be able to grab it from there. Yeah, that's the one I was looking for, but maybe they did change it.
You have a whole lot more tools on your screen.
Right.
I can't remember what it's called. The Follow Me tool.
So I will probably need to remind myself where to find like the actual icon for it. But for now, you can go up to Tools and Follow Me, and that should activate it for you. I thought it was. I'll find it next week. Okay, So with this guy here, you'll start to hover over your surface that you want to extrude, and again, you'll get those dots letting you know that you have the surface here. And then you will select the surface and then kind of start to drag along the line. So an important one for the Follow Me tool is you already have to have a line in place before you try to follow me along a line. So you'll already have to have your line set up, and then you're clicking that surface and then starting to drag along the line. And I'll keep on dragging throughout both of these half circle shapes that I have here, and then once I reach the end point, just click to finish. And you should have this little S-curve guy. You'll want to keep your cursor fairly close to that line, because if I'm trying to drag way out here, SketchUp just gets confused. It's like there's no line way out there for me to follow. So just try and keep your cursor pretty close to that line, and it should be able to pretty smartly follow that line. And then you'll notice once you click to finish, it does add a surface to the end here, so it is now one complete 3D object. All right, box 10. This one we're going to learn the flip tool, or mirroring an object. So this flip tool is actually new with 2023. So if you're ever working in a version that is before 2023, you used to just right-click an object and hit mirror. But now we actually have a graphic tool for it. So if it's up here in your ribbon, if not, we can still go to that Tools drop down and find Flip there. So with this one, we are going to select an object that we want to mirror. So I'm going to select this first group here, and our assignment tells us to flip this one about the red axis. So if I come up here and I choose my flip tool, now it shows me all these different axes that I can flip it by. So I want to flip it on the red, so all I need to do is just click that red axis there, and it should have flipped it along that red side. And what you'll see is that it kind of automatically made it just in the center of our object. You can click and drag these and move it around, and then it'll start to flip along wherever you specified that axis to go. So if you want it just about the center, just simply click it and it'll go, or you can click and drag and it'll flip from wherever you move that to. And then also for the second group, we are going to flip on the red again, but this time we're going to leave a copy in place. And so you've probably figured out by now that copy is going to be with the control key. So if I just click the control key, click my red axis here, it's going to leave a copy in place of that flipped. And you should be able to do the same thing that we did before, even with copying. So I hit control and then I'm dragging, and it's still going to leave that copy in place. All right, box number 11. Yes?
Show that one more time.
Yeah. So we're going to first select our object that we want to flip, and then either grab your flip tool if you have it up here in your top ribbon, or go to Tools and Flip, and that'll activate your different axes here. and this time I'll show it just on the green. I can either just click the green where it's at, and it's going to flip it about that center point of the object, or I can click and drag to move it, and then once I let go of that plane, it's going to flip it along wherever I just had that plane. And then for copying, very similar. Grab your object, hit the flip tool, hit Control to activate that copy, and you'll see the little plus sign showed up here. And then if I click on my axis here, it'll leave a copy in place for that flip. Okay. Box number 11. We're making our way through. So for 11, we're going to use the scale tool. This one does have a hotkey. It is S. So the scale tool either looks like kind of this brown box that has the red arrow with kind of that new red rectangle above it. That's the scale tool, or you can just hit S on your keyboard to activate. So the scale tool allows you to resize an object. So you're going to select the object that you want to scale. So I've got my surface selected here, and our assignment wants to scale the rectangle by 50%. So it'll make it half size if we do 50%. So to do this, I have my object selected here. I'll grab the scale tool, and you'll see these different grips have now shown up in different directions that I can scale the object by. So I can either just start to click and drag to scale my object, and it does snap for you. So if I'm just where I started, down in my dimension box it just says 1.0, so that means it's just the original size. If I start to bring it up, it'll snap to 1.5 or 150%. If I start to scale it down, it'll snap to that 0.5 or 50%. So you can either do it just by clicking and dragging, or again I can type in 0.5 and enter, and it'll automatically scale it to that half size. And it's also important just to note which grips you're using. So you can also scale it, in this direction where I'm just moving one side of it. If I were to scale it 0.5 in that direction, it would just move that one line halfway down. So if you want to scale it uniformly, you're going to want to use more of those corner grips, and you'll see that the grip across from the one that you choose is the one that stays in place. So I chose this bottom right one, so the top left one stays in place. If I chose the top left one, then the bottom right one stays in place. So you'll just need to be careful about which one you're choosing, depending on which direction you want to scale in, what wants to stay in place, etc. So for the next one, we're going to scale the cube by 150%. So I can either, click and drag to grab that whole thing, or I can triple click, and that's going to grab my whole object. This time, if I activate the scale tool, I have a lot more grips to choose from because it's a three-dimensional object rather than just that flat object. And I also forgot to mention, we can use our control key again, but this time instead of copying, it's going to make our scale move so that the center point stays in place. So rather than previously when we saw that the center point was just going to be whatever is opposite from the one that we choose, if we hit Control, you can see that kind of this center grip has turned red, and so that lets me know that that center point is going to stay in place. And then from there I can select one of my grips, and now you'll see that every side is scaling inward towards that center grip or outward away from that center grip. And so for this one, we're going to scale by 150% or 1.5. So if I typed in 1.5, enter, that should have made my object 1.5 times the size that it originally was. Box number 12. We are going to use the tape measure tool. So the tape measure tool can do two things. It can either measure the distance between objects, or you can also create guidelines with the tape measure tool. So first, let's just see how we can measure. So we'll select the tape measure tool. It literally just looks like a little tape measure up here. If you don't have it, it's also in your tools tape measure, and the hotkey is T for this one. So if you activate this, then your cursor starts to turn into that little tape measure. And we first just want to measure the distance between these two lines in box 12. So I can really choose from any point that I want to. Just click once to get it started. And it is actually going to bring that guideline with me here. And if I just hover over that line, there's a little dialog box that tells me 6 inches, or also in my bottom measurement box, it's also giving me the measurement that I'm pulling. So once I reach that line and SketchUp is going to snap to the line, it's telling me that it's 6 inches away. You can do that from endpoints as well. And then once you actually click and finish, that's when your guideline is going to be created. So if you saw whenever I started at an endpoint, it just kind of gave me this line that comes with me, and then once I click to finish, that guideline is going to be created in that same direction that I was pulling. But if I start from just kind of a random point on the line and start to pull, then that guideline is going to come perpendicular with me. So you just need to be kind of cautious about where you're starting your point from, whether you want to pull the guideline perpendicular away, or if you want it to just come with you. So in this assignment, you're first just measuring, so you'll see that it's 6 inches, and then you're creating a guideline that same distance, so the 6 inches to the right of the second line. And so same thing here, we can just type 6, enter, and it'll automatically put that guideline 6 inches away from our line for us. All right, box number 13, we're going to learn about tags. Tags, if you're familiar with AutoCAD, very similar to layers. So it just kind of helps you keep your model organized. You'll be able to turn on and off certain tags depending on what you want to see. So it's just a really good way to start to keep your model organized. So tags show up within your default tray that's over here on the right. And I also want to point out, just in case your default tray ever disappears on you, you can go to Window, hover over Default Tray, and just hit Show Tray, and it should pop back up for you.
I found out where it is, and I think the tray is also the large, the tool sets, all that's on there.
Perfect. Let's go.
Just on my-
Yeah, let's go ahead and look at that then. So we were talking earlier, some of us weren't able to find the Follow Me tool. It wasn't up here automatically, so Amy found it for us. I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce you. This is Amy. She's going to be our TA for the class.
Oh, you guys have no
Okay, good. I'm so sorry. So if you go up to the view bar, there we go. And then this first one called Toolbars, this is where you can start to add more of those tools that you want. So if some of them you'll see are already check marked because I already have them up on my screen. So for instance, if I unchecked my measurement tools, then, oh, I'm sorry, the measurement is just that little box for the measurement down on the bottom. So if you're ever not seeing your little measurement box down there, this is where you would find that. Just toggle on and off there. We can see here with our tags, this box that's up here that says untagged right now. If I just kind of toggle that, it'll go away.
I think it really should do the large tool set.
Yeah, I think so. The large tool set is going to be where a lot of your icons are living. So if I unclick that, you'll see that everything that was over there on my left side just disappeared. So if you're ever looking for certain tools, just come into this. We went to view toolbars, and then just start to kind of find the ones that you need to have on here
And
then.
I think the large tool set will always have the following tool. And
I think it
there's
does.
certain ones that are in that large tool set that are not in there.
Yeah. So if you want that kind of horizontal bar over here that's going to have all of your tools, the large tool set is definitely a good one to have. This getting started toolbar might also be a helpful one. It's got a lot of the ones that we've learned here today.
I like the views. I used the views a lot.
The views, yeah, the views are a good one. We'll get into more of those later in the semester. So if you're looking for tools that you don't want to have to go find by going to tools and pulling it down, just come here and just start to play with the different toggles that you can have on and off and see what tools come up for you. Yeah.
Is there a tool that records the screen?
That records the screen?
Yeah.
I don't think within SketchUp there is. Like for me right now, I'm recording my screen, but it's an outside program. I don't think Revit can, or not Revit, sorry. I don't think SketchUp can
Are you
record it.
referring to recording like an actual like a visual thing or something is it constantly saving?
Like to record like visually.
To see a video of
Yeah, or to provide.
Yeah, I don't know unless there's
No. The only thing, I don't know if this is what you mean, we can create like animation walkthroughs where we can kind of like fly through our models, but I don't think that there's something that you can like save and like go back to watch. Not within SketchUp, I don't think. Thank you for finding that, Amy. Okay, so a little detour there. Tags. So tags are just kind of a way to organize your model. So you have your default tray open over here on the right. It also is kind of like a little floater that is around. If you start to kind of pull towards maybe the right, it can kind of dock a little bit better, and then you can move it over here, just in case it ever starts kind of floating randomly. You can dock it a little bit better that way. I think you can also dock it kind of towards this other side, or just you can find wherever it works best for you. So we have tags. Minimize these other ones. Okay, so if I just click on this one called tags, it'll expand for us. And there's one that is automatically here called just untagged. That's where all of your objects are going to be living right now until you create more tags. So this will be helpful once we start to model more and more objects. Maybe you want to keep your cabinets separate from your furniture, separate from appliances, stuff like that. And then you can start to turn on and off things a little bit more easily. So to create a new tag, we'll just hit this little plus sign that's up here. It says add tag. We'll hit that and it'll automatically bring up another one for us. And so it'll just ask you what you want to name it. In our assignment, I told you to create a new tag that's just called Intro to SketchUp. So I'll just go ahead and do that here. SketchUp. And then hit enter and that name will be there. You can do a couple of different things to organize here. If you click on these colors, you can choose the different colors. It'd be more of just like a preference thing. I've seen people that like to kind of organize it as like rainbows, or all of their furniture is like different shades of purple or whatever. I have never been that, I haven't cared that much about it, but you do have that option too if you'd like to. And then you'll also see that there's this little pencil over on the right side. That just lets you know which tag is active. So whatever new elements I model are going to be on whatever that active tag is. So right now, anything that I model is going to stay on that untagged. But if I want to change it to our new tag, I can just click over here on the right, and that pencil will move down, and now anything that I model will automatically go to that Intro to SketchUp tag. Okay, so first what we want to do is we created our new tag called Intro to SketchUp, and then we want to change the tag or the layer of the lines in box 13 from untagged to the Intro to SketchUp. So whenever I select these, so I have my tag kind of tool up here already. So whenever I select these, it tells me what tag they're on, and so it tells me that they're on tagged. You can also, if you don't want to have that pulled up there, in your default tray, this top one should be called Entity Info. So if you expand that down, it'll tell you all of the information about whatever you have selected. So it tells me that I have 2 edges selected. It's even telling me the length of them. I can choose up here to like soften, smooth, whatever. But really what we're looking at right now is just the tag. So again, it's telling me that they are on the untagged layer. So I can just hit this little drop down here and change it to Intro to SketchUp. And now those lines should be on your Intro to SketchUp layer. And also now you'll see, so those were created when I was on the untagged layer, but if I wanted to create a line now with my Intro to SketchUp tag activated, if I go ahead and create this line and then select it, look at my entity info, it's automatically on that Intro to SketchUp tag, and I can always change it back to untagged or whatever other tag I want. Okay, and then box 14, last box here, we're going to look at groups and components. So groups and components act similarly in SketchUp, but they are just a little bit different. So grouping is just if you want to bring a selection of objects together as one kind of entity, rather than having them as individual parts and pieces. So right now this cube here is just a bunch of separate lines and surfaces, but we can go ahead and put them into a group. And so this will help you to kind of isolate your geometry a bit better. And so that's because SketchUp does something called stickiness. So kind of how we saw, if I wanted to move just this single line here, and I used my move tool, SketchUp's trying to drag everything with it that is touching that line, and that's what we call stickiness. Everything is trying to stick to each other. And it can get in the way when you want to move just a certain object, but everything touching it is moving with it. So if I had another rectangle or another cube here, and I wanted to just move this cube, well, it's not really going to work with me because it's sticking to the rest of the cube. So what I can do is we create groups and components. So to create a group, you will select the objects that you want to be in that group. So I want these guys here in the group. Right click, and you can either make component or make group. So right now we're just going to make a group of this one. And now you'll see that it turns into just kind of this one object. And in my entity info, it tells me that it is a solid group. So if I were to unclick, now if I just click anywhere on that group, it'll all highlight as one together. Similarly, we can create a component, very similar process, grab everything that you want, right click, and instead hit make component. The difference that you're going to see here when you hit make component is this little dialog box pops up, and you can add a name for this component, you can give it a description, a couple other things that are in here that we won't get quite into. But you'll give it a name, and then you'll just want to make sure that at the bottom here, this replace selection with component is checkmarked. That just makes sure that whatever you have selected will indeed become the component, rather than just creating the component but not actually making this one the component. So let's actually, I'm going to look back at the assignment to make sure that I'm not just going off on stuff. So the first one, it wants us to make a group of, so we saw how to do that. Grab it all, right click, and make group. So that one does not ask us for a name. It's just simply a group. The second one, we want to make a component. So I'm going to grab all of these, right click, make component. It's asking me the definition or the name. And so our assignment says to name it cube1, making sure that this is indeed selected. And when I hit create, I'm now left with this component in place, and the entity info says solid component. If I did not have that checkbox, so I just undid that component here, if I just right click, make component, cube1, and I don't have that guy checked, and I hit create, it still created that component. There's this little component box here, and I should in here have all of the components that are in my model. So there's my cube1 component, but this itself didn't actually turn into cube1 because I didn't have that checkbox. So if you just want to make sure that when you are creating your component that you have that check mark so that your selection does indeed become your component. So now we're going to see what the difference between groups and components really is, besides just being able to give it a name. So groups, you can make copies of both groups and components. So if I wanted to make a copy of my group here, I select it, hit M for move, and then hit Control for copy, and I'm creating a copy here. Then if I wanted to, edit this group here, I double click to move into the group, and you'll see everything else has become kind of grayed out, and there's this dotted box around just my group. That lets me know that I am in that edit mode for that group. So if I wanted to, I just activated push-pull tool by clicking P, I can start to modify this group, and it is not affecting the first group. They're essentially two separate objects at this point. However, with components, if I copied this one, so hit M for move, Control for copy, and I made a copy of this guy, if I now double click into my component, and I do the same thing, hit P for the push-pull tool, it is going to, whatever edits I make to this one, it's going to make to my original component. So that's the main difference between groups and components. Components are still tied to each other, groups are not. So, this could be helpful if I have a bunch of doorknobs in a project. I can just make one doorknob as a component, copy it around a bunch, and then let's say I want to change the size of the doorknob. I only need to change one, and it'll change them all for me, rather than if I were to make a group and copy that group all the way around, if I edit one group, it's not going to edit the rest of them. Does that make sense? Okay. So if I'm moving this one around, it's going to make the same change to that original. You can get away from this if you have created a component and you want to make another one, but you essentially want to duplicate it. You don't want it to necessarily be tied to each other anymore. You can make the copy unique. So what you'll do for that is, let me get rid of this copy here. If I select that one, move and copy. What I'm going to do now, because right now they're moving together, if I don't want that to happen, on this second box, I'll right click and hit Make Unique, and that essentially kind of severs the tie between the two. And you'll see up here in my entity info, it's now named Cube 1, Number 1. So that just tells me this original was Cube 1, and this one has now essentially been duplicated. It's now Cube 1, Number 1. And you can change it in here if you'd like it to be Cube 2 instead. You can always come up here and change the name of that or the definition of that. Yes?
I forgot to do the push pull for, there's a button that I press.
Like you can't find the push-pull
Like
tool?
it's giving me,
Yeah, so what I think might be happening, if you try and use push-pull tool, but you're not inside of the component or the group, it's not going to let you edit it until you double-click into that component or group, and then you should be able to edit it. So that's a really great thing that I failed to mention. It's not going to let you make any edits to this component unless you double-click and are actually drilled into that edit mode. And from there, you'll be able to move it. And so now you see, since I've made this unique copy, I've essentially duplicated it, I can now do whatever I want with this copy without affecting my original component. And then the last thing that I wanted to add on the topic of groups, components, and tags. This can get a little bit frustrating if you have a component, and this is set to the Intro to SketchUp tag because that was my active tag when I created this. If I wanted to change it back to my untagged, I can certainly do that. Change it to untagged, and now the component itself is on untagged, but if I were to double click into this, sometimes the objects that are in here will still be on the separate tag. So it can be that the objects themselves within the group can be on a different tag than the overall component itself. So here I just changed this surface to Intro to SketchUp, but if I click away, and if you're in that edit mode, you can just simply click anywhere to get out of edit mode. And if I go look at my component itself is still untagged. So that can get a little bit frustrating whenever you're working with your different layers. You just want to make sure that if you have a component that's on a certain layer, you need to make sure that all of the objects inside of that component or inside of that group are also on that layer. And so now with our layers, there's also this little eyeball feature here, and that just lets us know that it's visible. So if I were to turn that little eyeball off, well, first of all, it tells me that I can't hide the current tag. So I can switch the current tag or the active tag back to untagged. And then now I can hit my little eyeball, and anything that was on Intro to SketchUp is now going to disappear. It's just turned off. Turn it back on, and they all come back up. And then if I want to turn off untagged, all of those objects will disappear, make them visible again. Sound good? I know we went over a lot of tools. Are there any questions about the tools we went over? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.